I think we've got a few people trickling in. So those of you guys who are joining in, thank you and welcome. Yeah, if you don't mind keeping your microphones on mute, that'd be great. We encourage and welcome questions throughout the whole process. So if you do have questions, just open up the chat box and I'll be making a note of all the questions, and then I'll ask the guys the questions as well. So hello, Sumit. So I guess the way we're going to go through this this webinar is we're going to try and hit it in 5 different components. First one, obviously talking about taper, and obviously we're going to get the guys to give their opinions on how to taper, what they are currently potentially doing with their taper, or advice around taper. If you guys have any questions around your taper, feel free to start to pop some questions in there. From there, we're going to talk about the lead up, the days leading up to it, the night before, and then we'll move on to race day itself, and then recovery and beyond, and what you need to do thereafter. I'm happy to get started, and we'll get going. So I guess the question is open to all 4 of you. Is obviously we're reaching the taper moment, and I've spoken loosely to all of you about sort of like how things are coming along, but how are you approaching your taper, Amrit? What are things that you do in your taper that have worked well for you?
So I think previously I used to have maybe like a three-week taper. I think more often for the last couple of years in the last few training blocks, I think 2 weeks is more than enough. But I'll be honest with you, my body is ready to sort of have a reduction in mileage, just because of the fact that you do feel some fatigue. You do feel like when you are on certain sessions that it is creeping up, but then a nice reduction in mileage will help you get nice and fresh for race day, especially next weekend and obviously the week after. It's just about getting to the start line as fresh as possible, mentally and physically, more than anything. And I think just getting that race day mindset in the last week, keeping the legs sticking over. The sessions don't really count. You can't really gain too much in those last few, well, basically from here on in anyway, you can't really gain too much. You can only lose or do something silly and potentially put yourself in a worse situation. So I think 2 weeks is fine. A nice reduction in mileage. Eat well the couple of days before the race, and yeah, be ready on the start line in Greenwich.
Sure. Is there anything that you do differently to that, Natasha, or what's your sort of mindset to taper?
Yeah, so this time we're approaching it slightly differently. I think we've just not done quite as much mileage during this marathon build-up just because of injury problems. So we're actually going to do a shorter taper just because I'm not as fatigued as I normally would be. So we're probably going to go about 10 days out, just reduce, but keep the mileage there, just cut out the harder workouts, and yeah, hopefully approach the race completely injury-free, which will be the first time for the last few marathons I've not had that. So yeah, slightly different to normal.
No, definitely. There's definitely a good place to be, both obviously physically and mentally, coming into start line injury free. Nick, you've obviously got a lot of people you coach and approach you. What are some of the things that you see like people get wrong during like the taper period?
Yeah, I think they nailed it on the head. Like a lot of people start getting like anxious during the say with 2 weeks to go, and a lot of people didn't fit in that one last longer run that they wanted to. So yeah, I'm often getting asked like, okay, I wanted to do like a 23 mile, or I wanted to do a 36K. Is it too late to do it now? Can I squeeze it in? And yeah, I guess it depends on the person's training block, where their niggles are, where their injuries are, where their injury concerns are. Like Tash said, she's actually not going to necessarily reduce the mileage, just reduce the quality so she lines up fresh. So I think everyone's different, but like we all know in the last 2 weeks that there's not much you can gain. So in my view, it's just about keeping the flow there, getting to the start line in one piece, being as fresh as possible. And if someone is like really paranoid and needs to, because a lot of people, I mean, running such a mindset, so a lot of people need to hit a certain distance before they go to the marathon start line just to get that confidence. Then I think 2 weeks out is okay, but then you should have an aggressive taper from then. So like literally take 2 days off, freshen up, and then get the flow going, rather than trying to be a hero all the way through the marathon.
I think definitely some good points there. Marcus, any thoughts on that? Like, what would you say to that, or I guess how are you approaching your taper this time around?
It's kind of similar to what everyone said, really. I don't really have a massive taper. Yeah, in the last 2 weeks, it kind of reduces slightly. The only thing I could probably add to what everyone else has said is in the final sessions, don't try and run it like you're trying to run like a mile PR, or do you know what I mean? Just go hell for leather, because you don't need to put extra stress on your body. It's really done. Kind of do what you need to do, tempo work, but just save it for race day. So you're going to feel fresh, but yeah, don't be tempted to be going out there running 5K PRs or 1 mile PRs and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Because there's a lot of races back on. COVID is, I guess, we're past freedom day, so to say, and COVID restrictions are down, and there's a race pretty much every other weekend, if not, a couple of weekend.
Sorry, mate. I meant probably good concept. I meant like in the context of like training as opposed to going doing a race. In terms of like trying to keep that effort like fairly steady and respectful, but not just kind of going hell for leather in your training sessions. No,
definitely, for sure. So I was just sort of going in terms of like I was just segueing from that in terms of there are a lot of races on at the moment, and you are seeing people sign up to potentially doing a half a week, 2 weeks out before, and there's a ton of different events on. I guess what are your like? I think you've sort of answered that question there, Marcus. But I'm going to open the floor up to everyone here. Is how would you your advice to people on that and making sure they don't injure themselves?
So okay, I'll go. It's a question also I get asked quite often. So a lot of people have entered upcoming races because they got postponed and deferred, and they're all sort of clamped together. So like, for example, I'm doing a half marathon next weekend, which is the week before London, and to go and race that all out would just be stupid. So I'm using that more as like a training run. So in my plan, I wanted to do 10Ks at marathon pace that weekend, and I'll do 11Ks like comfortable and controlled, and 10Ks at marathon pace. Nothing faster, because that may stay on the legs the next day. So I think like to most runners, it's fine to go and do races, but like Marcus said, you need to be disciplined enough to like back off when the time's right, because there's nothing worse than going out and doing a race and then lining up to your main race with tired legs and just undoing all that good work. So it takes a lot of discipline, because in the racing environment, there's someone around you that you just want to beat. There's people shouting, screaming for you. You start off quick and you think, oh, I'm on track for a PB, but ultimately, you got to save it for the big race, because you only have a certain amount of cards or matches to burn. You don't want to burn them all in the races and the build up to that.
Definitely. Any of you guys have any thoughts to share? Any other sort of like opinions on that? And yeah,
I think I agree with Nick. Actually, I think the biggest thing, like obviously with the races coming back and stuff being put into the calendar, not ideally from you. Obviously, you still want to commit to it. You paid an entry fee. You still want to go and run it. But I think having that focus of what your A goal is, for example, a lot of us are picking an autumn marathon, and if you've got races coming up in the period from when the race is and before then, like I'm doing Hackney Half next weekend. I'm similar to Nick. I'm not racing it because I know it would be absolutely stupid for me to go out and go try and get a half marathon personal best before the London Marathon. So completely treat that as a training run, but just have that focus on what your ultimate goal is. If you've got a race coming up in the middle of October and you've got races lined up, you don't have to go out and race them. It's managing your ego. It's also managing the expectation that it's just you, and the pressure around of social media. Just try not to feel like you're going full leather at all times. It's just managing what your focus and your goals are, having A and B goals, and just basically being able to park certain things to certain races, and understanding that, okay, it's okay for you to go for a training run, then actually have your A goal, which you're sort of aiming for. And then hopefully if that works out, you actually achieve that.
Definitely. We've got a question that's come through. It says, I haven't been able to run for the past 2 weeks due to a grade 2 sprain. And I'm not sure if you guys can see that. So still got 1 more week of no running. So the participant says obviously still feels the need to get runs in right. And obviously the advice is to do so, or, what would you guys say to that?
So, I mean, I just read that question like that came through now. And it seems like Matthew can only run with a week left. So it's advised, so still one more week. Oh, so then he's got two weeks to refresh. So like, yes, obviously it's 3 weeks off, 2 weeks before the race. It's a bit of a tricky one. So you have to listen to your body. Either way, I would pencil in to try and run. And obviously, if you can't run at that stage, maybe you're better off deferring the entry and living to fight another day, lining up strong again, just because of the fact that you've been doing no running. But that'll be the ultimate test. If you run and your body's fine and feeling good, well, like we said, you can't gain any more fitness, but it'll be nice to just get a little bit of flow, get the legs ticking over, and some confidence to know that you can get through the marathon. But yeah, the running world, there's always going to be another marathon. So you might want to just protect yourself, but ultimately just your body will let you know when you start running, whether you can do it or not.
Yeah, for sure. I would sort of add my opinion here, just from like a physio perspective, is, just understand that if you haven't run for a number of weeks, there's a level of tissue tolerance that you've probably lost, apart from the cardiovascular fitness as well. And if you ramp up to doing a fair bit of running this far out before the event, you might likely, obviously, potentially flare up the current injury, but you might also have some issues surrounding other tissues like tendons, other soft tissue, other tissue like joints, things like that, have had rest for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you go and really ramp up the load again. So, you don't want to jeopardize not only the current race, but like Nick said, the upcoming months. London might get lost, but then you might end up spending 3-4 months rehabbing from everything else that you might have just overshot and overloaded the system with. So just really sort of play that smart there. We've got a question here. It says, running London Marathon remotely from India. That's awesome. Didn't get a entry in the ballot. What advice would you give someone running remotely and running the race solo?
Oh, I think a lot of us were in the same boat last year. I think the biggest thing I'd say is you are in control of where you pick your route. You're in control of what time you go. I'm assuming you have a certain window to do it in. Maybe it's like a 24-hour period, but you can essentially tailor pick everything where you start from, your route, your course. If you're doing it solo, I think that might rule out potentially someone being there on a bike, or even if maybe someone can stand and help you with your fueling, with your bottles. Make sure you've got enough liquid, etc., to help you, and gels, etc. But if you are doing it solo completely, then maybe run a shorter loop potentially and just keep lapping, so you are able to control your hydration. And the biggest thing is that if something goes wrong, you're not too far from home. So I think that's the key thing if you are running it solo. And main thing is to be safe. Main thing is to let people know where you are at all times, and make sure you can log it on a watch or your phone, whatever is required from London Marathon. But I think, yeah, you can tailor-made pick the weather. Obviously, you're not going to be able to pick the weather on that particular day, but you can actually pick the time, I guess, that you can actually, you're not fixed and regimented to being at a particular start line for like 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's a lot of things you can control yourself and tailor made for a good race. And there's certain things that you maybe just want to pick out just because it's a solo race and you're doing it on your own, just to keep it a little bit more easier for yourself, rather than going like 13 miles out and then something going wrong and then having 13 miles to come back. So just keep it quite condensed and keep it quite local.
I think that's great advice. So try and see if you can get a support cast around you, and make the day nice and easy for yourself. Guys, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about the lead up, and there's a question come in quite timely with that as well, which we'll answer in due course. How are you guys approaching, I guess, the last 7 days, the lead up? And I guess a lot of people have questions as to when is the last day they can run. Should they do strength work in the last week? I'm happy for anyone to sort of answer the question here in terms of what are you guys planning to do, or what are your recommendations around the week of the race and I guess closer towards the race?
I can jump in here.
Yeah.
So I cut out all strength work 2 weeks before. And then race week, I'll do one workout, but a lot easier than any other workout I do on the Tuesday. And then after that, it'll just be short, easy runs. I personally prefer to run right up to race day, but I mean, day before race day will literally just be a warm up and stretching, so it won't really be a proper run as such. But that's personal preference. I know a lot of people prefer to have the day completely off. So I think it's just what works for you.
How about yourself, Marcus?
Essentially, for me, it's just trying to replicate what I've done in the previous weeks. Obviously, taking on board what Natasha said, you know, in terms of ramping down workouts and things like that. But I try to keep everything else pretty much the same in terms of what I eat, what I drink, what I go to sleep. Just don't try to do anything new, really. Just try to keep it as relaxed as possible. Easy to say when you're going to be feeling very nervous, but the way I look at it is like, you've done all this work. It's been nearly 900 days since the last mass participation on the marathon. It's like something to be excited about. I'm excited about it, so I'm like, it's been a long time for an Australian, so looking forward to getting out there.
For sure. I'm looking forward to getting out there as much as I'm looking forward to the carbs that are going to go into my body. Really, I love a carb load as much as a post-race pints, don't get me wrong. But I used to do quite a drastic diet. So I would like cut out all carbs and then carb load to have a better effect. But right now I sort of do like a reduced calorie intake. So pretty much like Marcus, I'll stick to my normal foods, not do anything crazy, just have a reduced calorie intake for the first few days, because obviously you're doing a little bit less miles, so you wouldn't eat or necessarily need as much fuel as you would in the normal training world. And then having said that, I wouldn't starve myself, but I would have increased calories for the next 3 days leading up to the marathon. So like good carbs I have is things like whole wheat pasta, brown rice, sweet potato, those sorts of things. And I just find that sort of fuel gives you sustained energy throughout the race. What works for me might not necessarily work for others, but I found that really has worked for me in the past. And hopefully, actually, no, let's be positive, it will work in 16 days' time.
Yeah, I think for me, same, very much like the last 3 days before the race, just sort of, because and as Nick said, you're not running as much. So you just keep things as normal as possible, keep the intake the same. Last 3 days, just ramp up in terms of having carbohydrates. Again, same sort of foods. I do like to actually maybe drink carbohydrates. So you can get like the day before, you can have like whether it's a Science and Sport mix, a Morton mix, whatever. I think they recommend having one of them if it's a little bit more easier on your stomach rather than eating plates and plates of food. That I do not recommend. In terms of running, yeah, I'd probably keep this frequency the same. And I like to tend to run the day before, just like a shakeout, very similar time, maybe like an hour earlier, just to give the body another full 24 hours just to sort of recover, and then just stay off your feet, get yourself mentally in that zone and prepare everything you need to do at home, your kit, and yeah, ready to go on that start line.
Sure. Just with respect to the lead up as well, a lot of people do tend to sort of, get some soft tissue work done and a massage and a flush. When do you guys sort of look to get that done? Like, what would be the last day you'd want to do that, or recommend, someone doing that if they haven't, especially for those sort of first time marathoners?
Well, I know in my case, with my physio that I saw earlier today, we already started reducing the strength work. So the strength work is still there, but we started doing variations where we would do like sort of not as heavy and more intense work, just to spring some life into the muscles. So like Tash said, she lays off the strength work with 2 weeks to go. I'll probably lay off the strength work with about 10 days to go. And then as far as sports massage goes, I'm a huge fan of those. Like I've needed those as well. Just feels like it brings the body and legs to life. However, I would probably look to do that properly from about 10 days out. And then anything from then onwards would just be light, sort of like foam rolling, maybe massage gun, maybe like a light sports massage, but nothing sort of deep tissue, because obviously, I mean, that can affect you in the build-up. So yeah, that's what I recommend.
For sure. Anything different that any of you guys would do from what Nick has said?
I don't really get a lot of sports massage. So what I normally do is when I get to the race is normally when I have access to that. So quite often I have to travel a decent amount. So I just like to have a flush out on arrival at the race hotel, whether that be the night before or 2 nights before. But it'll be nothing deep. It'll just be quick flush out, just to get the legs and the blood flowing.
Yeah,
Fair.
same for me actually. This marathon block, I probably had like 2 massages just because of COVID, and I think it's opening back up again. I've been sort of relying on just doing self-maintenance at home, massage gun, rolling when I can. And if I was to have one, I'd probably, again, I agree, maybe like 10 days out or so, or if possible, very, very early on in that week. But I'm potentially not going to have one maybe until 10 days out or so. But again, it's just a light flush and just kind of just stick to what I've done. My body's found a way of recovering, and I can do the best sort of things at home, and sort of get myself on the start. And I don't want to make too many changes as what's worked previous in a block, getting it done regularly, and what I've done differently this time around. The body's learned a way to adapt, and yeah, I can do a lot of the stuff kind of at home, especially if you are traveling, if you are got if you don't have access and you're just a bit worried about maybe having something done too deeply on that week. I would highly don't recommend doing that. That was going to just make you feel a little bit zapped, and just take the spring out your legs.
Yeah, I think just to cover off on that point, like I think sports massages, a lot of people think massages are nice, but a proper sports massage is not nice. There's nothing nice about it. It hurts, it's painful, and it's not like you don't want to go and be having fun and getting sports massages like a few days before, because like it's not the sort of massage that you're thinking of if you're doing a proper one.
He's not lying. I've heard Nick scream through the doors of the clinic a few times. We've got a question come through, and I think it's funny because we were chatting about this, and I was chatting about this with Amrit on yesterday, I think it was respect to the whole bag drop situation this year with COVID. What are you guys' thoughts on, I guess, the whole bag drop situation, and then the question that Craig's posted as well? So first time marathon and debut marathon, mate, firstly, well done with the training, and I hope it's been going well. What would you say to Craig in terms of just trying to reduce the stress of the bag drop and everything else around that malarkey?
I think, yeah, I've spoken to Craig about this before, actually. I think, yeah, obviously this year is a bit of, I think it's a bit of a nuisance in terms of having no bag drop. For me personally, I'm going to be taking my wife with me at the start line because she'll have my phone. I don't race with my phone. I don't literally have nothing and nowhere to put it, no belt, and basically in my shorts I'll stash my gels, and I'll probably have a gel that I'll have my go-to gel first in my hand. In terms of what I'm going to discard, I'll probably just take like a very old pair of I don't know, some old joggers that I've got at home, which I'm happy to give to charity. And again, something warm on the day, depending on what the weather is. If we've got weather like we had last year, then it's going to be need some sort of waterproof, but just something that you can keep loose, something that's easy to take off, that you're happy to sort of give to charity, and just take your essentials. So all you need basically is your watch, your gels. If you need to take your phone for tracking, then do so, and make sure you just got something secure. So, I mean, I understand obviously they want to minimize the touch points, but it does mean that if you are going solo, then you're going to have to take your phone even in case you want to meet people afterwards, and just maybe have a practice maybe these last 2 weeks on how you're going to have that securely in your running belt, or if you're going to hold it in your hand.
Yeah, I mean, the way the format is this year, it's an absolute nuisance. But the one thing I would also just add to that point is that if you're meeting people afterwards, I think clarify an exact meeting point, because there's 40,000 runners, normally 500,000 supporters. Even if there's half of that, there's 250,000 supporters and 40,000 runners. And if you don't have an exact meeting point and you can't get your phone out your bag because you've given it to someone, then obviously, you might end up running a bit more than a marathon to find your people. So yeah, just try, like at the finish, there's meeting poles A, B, C, D, E. Like, I don't know, go have a meeting point at a pub or wherever you choose, but make it clear to the people you're meeting. Otherwise, I think a lot of people are going to struggle with that because they're not going to be able to get their phones until they walk out the area. And there's going to be a lot of people around then at that time.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, it's and the other thing with the bag drop is you have to go to the expo center, if I'm not mistaken, this year as well. So it's a bit of a kerfuffle with like having to subject yourself in an expo center with tons of people going around, and you sort of throw in the fact that there's COVID is still in the air, but, you know, as much as we'd like to think it's not. So, you know, you just want to try and keep it safe as well.
I mean, you can basically mail yourself a care package. So basically what it is, they've asked you to provide they're going to give you a box or a bag that you can drop off at the expo when you collect your running number for essentials that you'll get straight on the finish line. So in that box or your bag, they're going to put in your t-shirt, your medal, I think it's a bottle of water and like a Lucozade or something. So anything you might need there and then at the finish line, take advantage of that service. For example, if you want a pair of flip-flops, or a spare pair of socks, do that, drop it off at the expo. You'll be getting a t-shirt from London Marathon, so it's not essential to have that. It all depends on the weather of the day and what the forecast is on that week. If it's going to feel pretty chilly, then you might want like a long sleeve or a jacket, then take advantage of putting that into the box. I mean, I don't know how secure this is going to be by leaving your stuff at the Excel Center and hopefully seeing it at the finish line. But I wouldn't advise putting phones and any sort of tech or gadgets and stuff in there, just because of the fact that you just don't know what you might not see again. I've obviously left phones and stuff before and it's been fine, but there's going to be 50,000 runners, and yeah, it's going to be a bit manic.
Sure. I'm looking forward to seeing Amrit in flip-flops after the race. I think that's the main thing I got out of all of that.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, no, man.
I want to sort of put a question out to you, Natasha, because I know you're traveling and you're coming all the way from Wales. So there's going to be a huge contingency of people that will be traveling into London. What's your advice to those sort of like, you know, who probably be spending a night in the hotel room? What are things that they could be doing the night before and that sort of lead up to the race?
So I always like to make sure that I have all the foods that I'll maybe want, and don't rely on waiting until you get there, because you just don't know whether you'll actually get it or not. But yeah, traveling up, make sure you have all your plans nailed down and where you're staying, if you're staying overnight. And yeah, just make sure you're organized. It's one less thing to worry about. Always have your race kit on you. Never, like if you're flying, don't put the race kit, or check your race kit, make sure it's with you, just things like that, so you don't have to worry about anything about race day.
Sure. I know you guys have also traveled and done a lot of international marathons. What are some of the things that you guys like to do sort of, you know, the night before? I know Marcus has a few rituals from history where he's sort of mentioned as well with things that you try and do as well, Marcus.
Yeah, I like to watch like a comedy before the race day, because like the work is done, and I think like you don't need to be stressing, like looking in the mirror going all David Goggins and being like, I can do this. You've done it in training, so you're good. So you just need to relax. It's all done. Save your energy for tomorrow. Yeah, and try to get an early night. Obviously you're going to be nervous, you're probably not going to sleep very well, but that's a sign that you're ready. And don't feel like you're alone in that sort of that respect. I think if you weren't nervous, then there'd be something kind of wrong with you. But then it's just how you use those nerves. It's a way to kind of, you're ready to go, as opposed to something to be fearful of.
Definitely. What would you guys say about night before sort of like carb loading? That's always a hot topic. You know, I think if you go to Google and you type in like carb loading for marathon, you'll get Runner's World, and it says, you know, that's sort of 3.5 to 5.5 grams per pound of body weight, I think it is. Do you guys sort of follow that script, or do you guys have a different formula?
I personally, the night before, just eat what's comfortable and make sure I eat earlier, not a lot earlier than normal, but like 6, 7 o'clock at the latest. But I won't load up, I won't like measure it out, I'll just eat what's comfortable, as if I eat too much I won't sleep. So I think the actual carbo loading actually stops 2 days before rather than the day before for me.
Yeah,
How about yourself? Yeah, Amrit, you were going to say?
I agree. Actually, I think for me, I like to have my main meal. Maybe obviously I'd eat lunch, and I'd like to maybe have that a little bit, eat the main meal at lunchtime and then have something lighter in the evening. Just means that I can sleep a bit better. If you're traveling abroad, then again, you might want to check your reservations, etc., and just have it a little bit earlier. Just gives you a chance to digest it and not go overkill. The day before, you're only gonna, the worst thing you can do is just shove so much food into your mouth and literally just go overboard. If you've practiced enough, it should be enough that you've got that slight increase in your carbs in the last couple of days anyway, because you're not essentially running as much, so it's naturally going to store in your body a slight increase. I mean, I don't personally measure things out. Again, I like to eat what's sort of I like to have and what sits well in my stomach, and what's tried and tested previously. That doesn't make me end up going to the bathroom on the day. So as long as I can avoid stuff like that, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly similar in the fact that I don't weigh my food out or anything. I just sort of like eat until I'm full and feel energized. And I noticed like I'll also have my dinner a little bit early, but before marathon, I always have like a tiny bit more because subconsciously I know what's coming. So I'll have my, call it like spaghetti bolognese, and then I'll have a little bit more, and then I'll have like a tiny bit more just to like, not that it makes a difference, but in my mind, it'll be like more pieces of pasta just to get me there, you know? But one thing to note about like traveling abroad, because I did the Berlin Marathon, the last one, which was 2019, and we didn't do much research into, I just thought I'd go out and grab a good pasta somewhere. And we ended up walking like really far because all the restaurants were booked. And the only like decent, we eventually found a place that like gave us semi-decent pasta. But yeah, if you are coming in from far or going abroad, I think just do a bit of research, make a reservation, look at the menu before, because yeah, I mean, there's always a little bit of pre-race drama, and there's nothing wrong with that sometimes because it takes your mind off the race a little bit. But if you can reduce some of the variables going wrong, then I highly recommend that.
Yeah, just to add on that, if anyone's going to Berlin next week, go to Vapiano's, go to the one above Nike Town, and get there for 5 o'clock, because from 6:30 to 7 onwards, they're all round. You're in an hour queue, so get there early. There's 3 in the city centre, and just chill there. So if you're going to Berlin next week, yeah, I highly recommend using that because you don't have to book a reservation. It's basically get a card and walk in, but go around the 5 o'clock time because it's fairly empty. And I mean, I've been doing that 3 years in a row and it's worked. So yeah, highly recommend that for anyone going for Berlin.
I think that's quite ironic because there's a Vapiano's behind Nike Town in London as well.
I think they conveniently put them there, don't they? They conveniently put them there.
Sorry, Marcus, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I just kind of concur with what everyone is saying, really. I think the only thing I probably would add is that don't go too crazy. I mean, like that big bowl of pasta is not going to save your race the day afterwards. If anything, I think it's just try to keep it as like plain and boring as possible. Like if it's just rice and just grilled chicken or something like that, or like don't go too crazy on the sauces or stuff like that. Like your mates are going to be like, oh, let's go. Like, for example, I was doing Berlin last time and my mate's like, do you want to come out and try this meal and have these drinks? I'm like, dude, I'm running tomorrow. You're running tomorrow. You like stick to what you normally eat. Just don't divert. Save it for the day afterwards until, like Nick says, like save the carbs and all the good stuff until after the race.
And I think just on that as well, with the current context and climate, is London is getting busier. People are wanting to go out just generally. So the fact that you're going to have a lot of people coming into London for the race, booking hotels, get a reservation in at the right time, because if you don't, like Amrit said, you'll be running around town, you might not get what you're after, and then you end up eating too late and it just throws you off. So, be proactive and make that booking ASAP. Guys, it was from experience or just things that you know as well, is there anything that you'd say is an absolute no to have the night before?
I think for obvious reasons, stay away from spicy food. That can really mess your stomach up, and that's difficult for me because I love my chili sauce. Like Nando's extra hot sauce isn't hot enough for me. So the day before marathon, it's my worst thing, as I have like a dry piece of chicken or salmon with my pasta, and I mean, it doesn't even taste good. I just get it in. But don't worry, you can make up for it the next day. And then yeah, like Marcus was saying, I think stay away from saucy food. So like the more boring the better, because yes, it might taste great, but if your tummy's not great from halfway, that is way worse. So save that stuff for after the race. Like it's only 24 hours away, you can wait that long, it'll be worth it.
I feel like Marcus has some experiences because he started giggling as soon as I asked the question.
Too much Nando's extra hot sauce.
I saw the comment come up from Chris saying chicken risotto, because that was my downfall for Manchester Marathon. He gave me food poisoning like the day before the race. So yeah, That made me chuckle. Obviously not during the race, but obviously now I can laugh about it.
Yep. How about you, Amrit and Tash? Anything that you guys have, you know, had bad experiences with or things like that?
I just kind of keep it as plain as possible, but I think, and I haven't experienced it personally, but a lot of people try different gels during the race. So I think race fueling is another big topic that a lot of people underestimate, because a lot of gels don't work for various people. They're all very different. So definitely stick to what you've practiced with.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, we're definitely going to come to that, because that's always one of those topics, isn't it? Like which gel and what gel to have. But I guess if we rewind a little bit, what are some of the things you guys would say, like your top tips for things to do on the day of the marathon, from waking up to what to eat and how to prepare? And I guess keeping in mind you guys have run London before, what are some of the obstacles or barriers that people might not be aware of to sort of navigate around? Amrit, I'll start with you, mate.
So for me, obviously, I don't actually know what time the race starts this year. I'm assuming I'm going to say 10 o'clock. So for me, I like to have my breakfast, say 3 hours early, 3 hours before the start time. It just gives me enough time for it to digest. My breakfast, very simple, just a glass of orange juice, 2 slices of toast, peanut butter and jam. That does the trick for me. And maybe with a cup of tea as well. But what I do mostly is when I wake up, I tend to have just like a glass of water, a pint of water, just to start the hydration. And then I'll probably sip on my way to the start line, just like a bottle of like, it's like a 160 mix or like a electrolyte mix, something like that, just for me to sip on. And I'll take with me to the start line just a plastic bottle of water that I'll have maybe then I'll discard just to keep the fluids topped up. In terms of getting there logistically, if you are running London, I have access to Transport for London, the whole of the network. So that's zones up to 1 to 9. So all you got to do is show your bib at the barriers and you'll get let in for free. So you don't have to worry about buying a ticket, which is a positive. I just tend to like to get there maybe like an hour and a half or so early, just to I know the course fairly really well. I know the start line and the sort of the bit at the start. But one thing that's different this year is obviously you don't have to go and check a bag drop, so you save a little bit of time. So go there, get yourself set up, go there, go use the toilets, get a warm up in. The biggest thing I'd recommend is just try not to rush. Try not to think that, oh, I'll leave it 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Just give yourself enough time. If you're doing it for the first time, head there nice and early. Trust me, you do not want to be running late. You do not want to be rushing your warm up. You do not want to be going to where the start line is in Greenwich and using the toilets and seeing the queues, because the queues are going to be absolutely horrendous. You can actually go closer to the pens. There are toilets there, so don't be fearful that these are the only ones. There are thousands and thousands of Portaloos, and that's probably one of the biggest gripes that people have with the start line of the race, is just doing the things that you do at home and just trying to replicate that as much whilst you're there. But yeah, give yourself enough time. Don't try anything different on the day. Just get there nice and early and just soak up the atmosphere, because you may only ever run it once, you may run it several times, but they're all different and unique. So I think, yeah, those are the biggest tips I have.
Sure. Nick, anything that you're doing differently, or sorry, rather that you're doing that you do for your prep day on race day? Like, what does your breakfast look like? Do you have something quite similar to Amrit, or do you sort of change it up a little bit?
Yeah, so I've actually got like peanut butter addictions as well. So I've peanut butter on toast does the trick for me. So my race day will start like this. I'll start off with Science and Sports electrolyte or hydration tablets. And then I'll maybe have like on top of that a scoop of the Energy Go full of electrolytes. I'll then have my 2 or 3 slices of peanut butter on toast with a bit of honey to keep me sane in the head and just for a bit of sweet stuff. And then I'll have a Morton 320 drink mix on the way there. I obviously always like stick to the same routine. It works for me. And if something works for you, never ever change it. And I often recommend that people trial their race day nutrition within maybe their longest run in the build-up. And if it works for you, before, chances are that it will work again. You don't want to try anything new on race day. I say that, but there's Lucozade race shells on London Marathon. And in my first one, I just felt like I needed one towards the end. So I had one of those. It worked for me. I know a lot of people, there's Lucozade gels, go straight through you. And they give tummy issues, so just be careful. Like, only resort to that if you're dying and you need energy. And yeah, I think, you know, the normal, like there's a lot of people get there before and literally soak in that atmosphere. There's a vibe, there's a buzz. This year's going to be a bit different. I mean, we don't even know what time we're starting. The race is in 16 days time. People want to know what point must they meet me at. I don't know. I'm waiting to see what time we start. So it might be like tiered, well, it is going to be tiered start. So I don't know how many people are going to start together and stuff. So this year is going to be a bit different. We'll all need to do a bit more research. But yeah, one thing I can guarantee you is even if there's a tenth of the normal vibe, it's going to be a vibe. So just enjoy it, because at the end of the day, like marathons can be scary, and you know, you can have a good run or a bad run, but you don't want to look back and like say you didn't enjoy it. So whatever it is, soak it in. You're lucky, you're blessed, you're privileged to be doing it. So enjoy it.
Sure. In terms of warm up, what do you do for your warm up, Marcus?
You're talking about pre-marathon or just generally?
Just in terms of like race day, so you know you get to the start line or in and around that area. What does your warm up consist of before you get going?
Yeah, for me, I just try to. I'm not one of these people that are sort of up and out. I'm just trying to save my energy, try to be relaxed and save it for the race. So you won't see me doing sprints. You won't see me running around like a madman. If anything, you might see me doing like a slow jog to elevate my heart rate slightly, but very short. Not like a mile or anything like that, nothing stupid. And then I'll just be doing like a series of lunges just to kind of activate the glutes. Something really light, nothing that's going to tire you out, because you're going to need your energy mentally and physically before the race.
Sure. Do you guys do anything differently, Natasha?
Yeah, I tend to, I guess, keep my warm up quite similar to my workouts and other races. So I will do a 2-mile warm up and followed by stretches and then strides, and then obviously on the start line I'll do a few more strides. So yeah, I guess I do a more full warm up than most marathon runners, but I also think that's slightly different being on the elite start line, is we do have that extra time and we don't have to like rely on other people. We're escorted to the start, we have that extra time, we have the space to do all that as well.
No, definitely. If we talk about sort of like during the race, one of the hottest topics is gels, what gel to take and when to take that. I know talking to Marcus a couple of years back, I know Marcus goes through this routine. Correct me if I'm wrong, mate, but you sort of like almost know which gel is in which pocket, and then obviously then you have a timing around that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to find what works for you, and I think there's the thing with taking gels is like, although they give you recommendations and stuff like that, you've got to find out what works for you, because obviously when you're running, your body's under stress and your stomach can only digest a certain amount. So even if it says like 30 minutes, your body might take slightly longer to process the carbs. So you have to kind of find what works for you. I know that some previous sort of companies sort of said, like, you know, have a regular caffeine, but then you've got to bear in mind that there's only so much caffeine you should really have, and also caffeine can be like a slight irritant, so, and it takes a while for it to kick in. So for me, if I was going to use caffeine, it'd be towards the end of the race. And I just sort of generally, I mean, I use Morton, so I try to practice just using the regular ones throughout a certain period of time. But what that period of time is for you, they give guidance. I mean, you could take, you know, the full 5. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, I don't know, it was like, yeah, I think you could take a couple for a full hour, but it's a lot. I mean, I've heard other people as well do like the 320, you know, drink mix and discard it for the first hour, especially for the masses, and then they go to the gels. So that could work quite well, because you need to get 8 grams of carbs. But it's quite challenging, because obviously for the masses, you can't obviously have your drink stations laid out unless you're in Berlin, which they did do it for the masses as well. But yeah, ultimately you've got to find what works for you and practice it in training.
Definitely. Nick, is there anything that you would recommend a first-time marathoner in terms of, you know, especially if they haven't trialed playing with gels and hydration in their longer runs in the lead up as much? What would be your recommendation to someone? Or and I guess and then the follow-up question to that would be, how do you go about your race nutrition?
Okay, so my recommendation for that, it's quite a boring one, but it's the one that works, is you should try, if you haven't tried it in training, don't try anything new on race day. Like what I would mention is that there's a few people that react certainly to different gels. So like the textures between the Morton gels and Science and Sport ones are completely different. Some people prefer high five. So it's good to test and play around with it in training until you find what works for you. And then one thing I would mention on race day is that I like in my head, I know I'm taking a gel at the start, 11K is 22, and my last one's going to be a caffeine one at 33, right? But if at that stage my stomach is feeling a bit dodgy, or it feels like this gel could push me over the edge stomach-wise, then I'll stay clear of it, because that's obviously the effects of forcing that gel down and having stomach issues is way worse than actually skipping that gel and maybe losing out on a little bit of energy. The other thing I would say is try and keep it consistent throughout the run. You don't want to like be dying, hit a wall, and like start squeezing gels down, because that's too late. You're already depleted. It takes a while to kick in. So you need to get it in your system before then. And yeah, I've already touched base a little bit on what my gel strategy will be. So I'll take 4 if all goes to plan. So I'll take 1 at the start, and then I will run with 2 in my hands. I'll take 1 at 11 Ks, 1 at 22 Ks, and a caffeine one at 33 Ks. So literally spread it out. I leave the caffeine one for last personally because it gives me a bit more of a kick, and it's higher risk of messing up your stomach. So I'd rather take that risk later on in the race than early on. But then again, I know people that have caffeine gels from the start. So it's just whatever works for you.
Yeah, similar for me, similar to Nick, actually. Like I would take one at the start line. Again, I agree with like the texture of different gels. You need to find, like obviously with London Marathon, they've got the Lucozade gels. I don't really know anyone who uses Lucozade gels anymore. So I recommend, if you are going to have one of them on the day, if you are a newcomer, then you must, okay, if you need an energy kick, you need some sort of boost, some sort of sugar intake, then do it. But if not, just stay clear. And what you've actually got 2 weekends now to try and practice, at least taking some sort of a gel form on the day, and then stick to it. If you find it works pretty well, then stick to it on the day. I'll probably take one at the start line, which I'll do. Then I'll probably take one at about 7K, and then at 14, and then take a caffeine one at halfway, and then one at 28K, and then I'm potentially will take my last one around that one. I'll have a spare one in my pocket if I need one, maybe at the 35K mark, but then I start off with them loaded in my shorts, and I have 2 go-to ones in my hands. I'm just carrying them at the start just because of it's a little bit easy, and I know which ones I'm having straight away. So I would have positioned them in the back of my shorts, knowing which one's which, so I can just basically just grab them and have no element of surprise on the day.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I remember Marcus, you might have shared a story where you might have messed up where the gel was in which pocket. Am I right in thinking that? Or am I getting that mixed up from a previous story?
You're getting that mixed up with someone else, mate.
Sorry, mate.
I'm always organised. That never happens to me.
But yeah, I have heard of like runners like accidentally forgetting, like, you know, you've got this gel in this pocket, and then all of a sudden you don't look, you just rip it up and you go for it. So just know, do your pre-race checks, make sure you know exactly which gel is in which pocket. And then, yeah, if you haven't sort of practiced a lot with that in your training, then like Nick said, it's boring, but it's sound and safe advice is just don't try anything new, and just, you know, go for your race.
One more thing, sorry, mate, on the gel thing,
go for it.
I mentioned was I tend to sip my gels consistently throughout the period of time rather than ripping the gel open and downing it. And I find like that helps my stomach a lot more. So if you find that you've got stomach issues, which can happen, just tend to just try to sip it over that period of time rather than downing it.
No, definitely. I think that's good advice. For those that are doing their sort of first London, you know, it's the start line, it's buzzing. They've got the guys with the trumpets and the bands and everything. It's, you know, there's a lot of energy, and it's quite easy to get carried away and burst out of the gates. What are some of the tricks, I guess, you guys do to get in the zone? And then what would you recommend people to do, especially those new marathoners?
Okay, I'll go quickly. So the trick I like to do is, and it's difficult on London, and I know in my head I'm saying this, but I didn't listen to myself on this occasion because I started at the non-championship start, the last London Marathon, and I went off and I was leading for the first 5Ks, and it was incredible, and there was a vibe, and kids were shouting, "This guy's leading London Marathon," and it made me go faster and faster. And next thing I checked, and I was going way too fast, and I thought, oh, it feels okay, let's just go with it. And yeah, I ended up hitting a massive wall, and I missed my target time by 2 seconds. So what I would say is, and this is what I learned on that day, and what I knew before that day, I just got carried away because it's so difficult, is to just try and think of the last 10 kilometers from the start. So that's what I do. Like if I'm feeling good in the first 10 Ks, I hold back. If I'm feeling good at halfway, I hold back until, if I'm really feeling good at 10 Ks to go, then I slowly start opening up. Look, you can still hit a massive wall with 4 Ks to go. So don't do anything drastic, just open up a tiny bit. But yeah, just thinking of like the last 10 Ks from the start, that helps me hold back a little bit more.
Definitely. How about yourself, Natasha?
Yeah, I think very similar to Nick. Just don't get sucked in at the start, because that race day adrenaline will make you want to go faster. So yeah, stick to your race plan. And very similar to Nick, I wait for 6 miles to go, and then that's when I start picking up the pace. Because around the 20-mile mark, that is where you're likely to hit the wall if you do go too fast at the start. So yeah, that 20 miles is where you want to start picking it up.
Yeah, I think yeah, very similar. It's very easy to get caught up in like the adrenaline of everyone else going past you, but end of the day, you're running your own race. It's just you. It's you there. It's the focus on what you have and your race plan. I always start to think of it like something like an old coach said to me was run 10 miles, the first 10 miles with your head, second 10 with your heart, and then the last 10K, the first 10 with your head, second 10 miles with your legs, and then the last 10K with your heart. So if you're feeling good with 10K to go, you've got permission to basically just let rip and basically put the hammer down and go for it, because that's where the race is make or break. And I think just stick to your own race plan, stick to ignore what everyone else is doing. I think that's the best way you can sort of have the best success on the day.
Sure. There's always I guess a point of contention with you know, people talking about like syncing their watches, and maybe they haven't clicked their watch on at the right time, and maybe because of GPS things fall in and out, and pacing becomes an issue. How do you guys sort of manage your pace through the race with your watch, or what strategies do you use?
Can I just jump into this one? I think the first thing with like watches is just don't look at your watch. Basically, you should trust yourself. You should know what it feels like in your training runs. And I know that might sound a bit woo-woo, but you should know what that marathon pace would feel like. And I think even in the first few miles, you kind of want to ease off slightly to sort of save you jumping in and burning too much energy. And also when you get to Canary Wharf, you know, you're going to have the skyscrapers and your GPS is going to go crazy. So that's the time you probably don't want to look at your watch. So I think it's okay to check on it time to time to check that you're on pace. But if you've got to sort of rely on your body, if that makes any sense, rather than just use it as a guide, but your body is the main guide, if that makes sense. Your body tells you what you can do and what you can't do. Yeah, in my head, I might think I could run 5 something pace, but reality might be slightly different.
How about yourself, Nick?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, like it is difficult to not look at your watch. And I see Kay said she gets obsessed with her watch a little bit. At this day and age, you got your watch telling you whether you're being productive, whether your VO2 max is going up. You have the best session of your life. Your watch tells you you've been unproductive. You've dropped 2 in VO2 max, and all this stuff messes with your head. I promise you, like, you know better than your watch. So first of all, like, use your watch as an indicator, but ultimately, you know a lot better than your watch. Like my previous marathon, I did a massive PB and my VO2 max was lower than ever before. So clearly, like, something wasn't lined up there. But it's also easier said than done, because when you're looking at it and it's telling you this, you're like, okay, is there a bit of truth to it, or what's the story? And the other thing I would mention is that if you're going for a specific time, like myself, I will be writing the splits down on my arm, and I will sort of check that along the route as I go along. So I'll maybe do like a 10K split, a 20K split, maybe 25, and then from 30 onwards, maybe every like 3 or 4, or maybe to 35, and then like 38, 40, 42. So that way, at least I know I'm on track. Ultimately, like Marcus said, you run according to how your body feels. So whether or not that's going to make me run fast or slower, I don't know. But I think like it'll give me a bit of like peace of mind to know that, okay, cool, I'm on track at this point. Okay, now I need to go for it. And I would rather go for it and hit a bit of a wall on this occasion than like back off and not go for it at all. So yeah, just be able to route check on time, because there's nothing worse than a runner finishing a race and saying, oh, like the route was 1 kilometer long, and actually according to my watch I did this PB, but according to the official results I did this. No, whatever the official results said, that's the result. So don't let the GPS mess with your head, please. And it will go wrong in London. You go Canary Wharf, lose a signal, and you go under this massive tunnel, and you'll be running like 2 minutes a K, and on the other side you'll be running 7 minutes a K. So yeah, don't let it mess with your head.
Yeah, I remember in the big half, I clocked at 8-minute K around Canary Wharf, and I was like, you know what, I'm not running 8-minute K pace. So yeah, don't obsess with your watch. Like, use it again. I agree with what everyone said. Just use it as a guide. You should know what it feels like to run your marathon pace target on the particular day. So glance at it when you need to. But again, I agree with writing the key splits down on your hand, or you can maybe get like a little wristband sort of thing that you might want to put on your wrist, which has like the time splits on there. So just use that against the time that you have. Just remember that the clocks, I think, around London Marathon will be from the start of the race. So if you started 10 minutes after, you're gonna have to add 10 minutes. So I think that's what happens. So just be careful that when you cross the start line, you are essentially starting your own timer. So do it to that time rather than looking at what the clocks are saying on each mile. So because that will be from the actual start of the elite race when you are starting with the masses.
I got a question from Craig. So what if you don't know your what if you don't yet know your marathon pace? I've had a niggle and not really managed it. So yeah, what would you guys say to that? How do you pick a pace? Is there a general rule?
I mean, in that case, I would probably err on the side of caution, just because I haven't done much running. And yeah, I would say have like an A, B, and C strategy. And A strategy goes well, and you do maybe a negative split. B strategy, it gets tough, you do equal split. C strategy, well, you lose a bit of time. But yeah, it's a tricky one at this stage if you don't know what your marathon pace is. I wouldn't force anything, but I would maybe just go off more conservatively. And if you're feeling good, well, pick it up at halfway. I think if you look at the stats of marathon runners, it's probably 96 or 7% of people do positive splits. It's normal. You get fatigued, like it's completely normal. But just bear that in mind and know that actually, well, if you're going slower than your marathon pace and you pick it up, you'll feel better than everyone. It's motivational, overtaking people. There's nothing more motivational than that. And you will feel good on the day. So yeah, I think obviously in someone like Tasha's situation, it's a bit different. She's racing sort of like for time, yes, but for position as well. So she's at a great build up. So I think in her case, it's like she's got to make a call. Do I go with this group? Do I go with this group? I don't want to fall off this group type thing. So in her case, there might be like some more surges, but I suppose that's the professional end of running right there.
Sure. Just we'll go back to this as a question I think we might have missed is how much fluid do you guys take on board with your gels? I've been trying to train with less water electrolyte mixes as it's always a challenge on race day. Not sure if you guys have answered this already or is there something more specific to that? Have you seen the question from Chris?
Yes, I've seen the question from Chris. In terms of, I don't drink from every water station, not at all. I think I just drink to when, I don't necessarily need to take a gel. Also, I don't need to take water with a gel. I think I've got used to just having it down and obviously the body feels comfortable. And I think that, again, you don't necessarily on the day of the marathon have to take a drink from every single station. I think they're positioned every mile, every 2 miles or so. You don't have to do that. Just do what's you've practiced. And in terms of how much, I'd like to take a few sips, just put a little bit on my hands, and then that's about it. I don't gulp it down because I don't want it sloshing around in my stomach and then later on in the race causing an issue that I just feel a little bit uncomfortable. So they're small enough bottles that you can have a couple of sips of them and then just drip them, discard them safely, and then I think that's fairly okay. But if you need to take water with your gels, then I guess your new race nutrition strategy is going to be around where the water stations are. So I think London Marathon will release that in the upcoming days with a route map in terms of where the actual water stations are, and then you can just time your nutrition so around that where you need to pick them up. So yeah, depending on what you take, on the particular day I would just take water. I think I can cope with that. I don't need to take any of the Lucozade unless I'm absolutely desperate and I'm like crawling my way to the finish line. I will take that sugar hit if I've run out of stuff, but most often I'm happy just to have the gels that I've got with me and water on the day.
Awesome. Guys, I think, some great tips there. The final sort of like leg of this webinar is talking about recovery after the race and sort of when do you run next. I think it's always this sort of thing where, runners will do a marathon and they'll try and get back and run, really, really quickly, sometimes even the next day. There was a good article that came out a few years ago that said it's typically a day per kilometer you run in recovery for let your body to get back into homeostasis, equilibrium, where your tissue is sort of recovered. Not to say that you wait 42 days to run, but it just gives you an idea as to the amount of load and how much you sort of bash your body on the day, and just to respect that. How do you guys go about your recovery? I know I spoke to Nick today about that, and he said he might take a week off. So I'll let you sort of start that one off, Nick.
Cool. Yeah, I think that like marathon training can get brutal, and it's quite mentally taxing. It's always worth it on the day, but it's really good to give yourself not just a physical break but a mental break from the training. Often what happens is you end up getting post-race depression. It is a real thing. As soon as the race is over, you're like, what now? I don't have a purpose. I need to commit to another race. Like, this is boring. This. What I am going to do is I'm going to take a full week off. And then, much like Natasha's race build-up week where she does no sessions, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to run like with my watch the other way around, pressure-free, just go out and enjoy it for the love of running. I think 42 days to recover from a marathon is probably an accurate description. But yeah, like, see, there's the race build-up can get grueling, and don't forget how tough it is when you want to start getting into the running again. One more thing apart from the running that I've mentioned in recovery to the race is that I try and get recovery protein in within half an hour. So I might actually put that in my, like Amrit said, that like essential bag. I might just either put like a Science and Sports regular recovery drink, or there's protein smoothies, tribal protein smoothies, whatever the case, that'll be there. Because I'll finish that, I'll have that. Obviously, a post-race pint is amazing, but you need to just look after your body first, and just let the recovery process start before, I suppose, getting into the celebrations.
Sure. Marcus, how about yourself? When do you see yourself taking that first run after London, mate?
Kind of following on from like what Nick said, I think as you get a little bit more experienced, I think you realize that the physical break is equally as important as the mental break. And if you're doing the marathon training right, I mean, if there's a right way to do it, it is quite mentally taxing. And anyone that says it otherwise is lying. So I think you've got to give yourself time to kind of, rediscover when it comes to the love of running, to take some time to do some other things. The temptation, like Nick said, is just to, jump back and forth. And I hear people say this all the time, like, oh, I'm so close to my time, I'm going to jump into it next time. If you want to race a good marathon, I think you've only really got a limited opportunity like every year. You can't just keep hammering it like 3-4 times. You could run multiple marathons, but you're not going to run them, knock out 4 PRs straight in a row. So it does sort of take some time. So I think the most important thing is just to kind of reflect, give yourself some grace, do some of the things that you didn't do before, spend some time with people that you love, you care about, and just do some different things, and then just get back into it gradually, as and when as you feel like it, depending on how competitive you are or what sort of your timescales are, and just kind of allow just the kind of the love and the drive to come back. Because sometimes, like in everything, you can't just keep hammering things for a consistent period of time. You need to give yourself some time. I mean, I think even Abdi was sort of saying, he takes like a month off, and he's like an elite runner as well. So you don't have to get straight back into it after 7 days. But ultimately, if you want to, that's not a problem. Do you know what I mean? If you feel the drive and you want to start get back into it, that's fine as well. You have to find what works for you.
Sure. How about you, Natasha? At the elite end, how do you approach your recovery and the time after the marathon?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best one to take advice from, because I actually run the next day. But by running, it's more of a shuffle, like a 5-minute shuffle, more just to make sure that everything's okay. I've not got any injuries, don't need any treatment, that kind of thing. But then after that, I will take the week off from running completely. If I do want to do something, it will just be like light cross training. Normally because I prefer active recovery, but it won't be anything set, it's just how I feel. Generally take a mental break as well. So quite often have the whole week off work. Yeah.
That 5-minute shuffle that you do, is that something? Sorry,
Ready to go again.
So I think we might have just lost you towards the back end, Natasha, there. But that 5-minute shuffle that you do the day after, is that something you've developed through the years? Like, could you run us through that thought process?
I started it from the start, but I think it's something that I've progressed a little bit more as I've done more marathons. I know a lot of people probably can't walk the next day, but I just like to get out and do that. Yeah, make sure I'm not injured.
No, it's definitely interesting. I think, you know, obviously you've been doing this and you're doing it at an elite level, so you understand your body. So it's just nice to, I guess, understand the thought process and the rationale behind it. And, you know, you know your body. So if you weren't able to do it, I'm sure you probably would obviously back away from that as well. So no, that's definitely very interesting. How about you, Amrit?
Yeah, I think I agree with the guys, actually. This is probably contrary. I've actually signed up to the Royal Parks a week later, which is probably a silly move anyway, but I'm pacing one of the guys on this webinar. So I'm hopefully gonna go take it nice and easy for myself and obviously pace him to a PB. So I'm not gonna run for pretty much the whole week. Again, I agree with Natasha, just keep it active, just go for a walk, I don't sort of, I can understand like the motivation going and depending on what your race is, but even for me, like the week after the run, I will just run just too easy, just because I just like to be out there, regardless of time, pace, sessions, none of that, until I feel ready enough to actually get back in there. So initially, like I sleep really badly on the night of the marathon, always. Like I find it very difficult to take food in. I remember me and Marcus had a burger in Berlin a couple of years ago, which was probably one of the best burgers that we had, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's just the adrenaline in the body. So, but again, I will pack into my race pack. You can get the Science and Sport sachets, which are just mixed up with water or milk, whatever you take that with. So I'd highly recommend getting that in as soon as you sort of finish within that sort of 30-minute window, because that's the kindest thing you can do to your body, just to start that recovery process before you start eating plates and plates of food, and which you're licensed to do anyway. So again, yeah, so I would initially just take a few days off, the week off initially, but in this case, obviously I'm going to go back to the start line a week later and do the Royal Parks, which will be fun. But I think for me, just keep it very, very, very easy.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I guess I'm just going to go around and let you guys sort of finish off with maybe one tip, one thing that people could sort of take away for London that we probably maybe haven't spoken about. So I'll start with you, Marcus, and then we'll make our way around.
It's kind of following on from the point about the watch, and in my last race when I did my last PR, you will have, you know, you want the race to go perfectly. Sometimes it does, and sometimes you'll have some really dark moments, and in those moments, do not look at your watch, because if it says you're doing this pace and you want to be doing this pace, it's going to get in your head. So the best thing I did was just like forget the watch and just be like, look, I know what this pace feels like. You have to give yourself that real talking to and get through that really horrible feeling. You know, as much as we'd love to kind of go through a race and it all be perfect, you've always got to plan for those moments when it doesn't go so well, so it doesn't creep up on you and it's not a surprise. So in those moments, kind of don't focus too much on those sort of external factors. Just remember that you've got everything that you need, and you know, regardless if you get the time that you want, you've got everything you need to get to the finish. So just keep believing yourself.
How about yourself, Nick?
Yeah, that's actually a great point that Marcus makes. I think, you know what, you're going to go through 100 different emotions in a marathon. You're going to start off feeling amazing, then you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel amazing. You're not going to feel good. At the end of the day, just like give it your best. That's all you can ask for, is to give it your best. It's been almost 900 days. You're privileged and lucky if you are doing London to be able to do it. And yeah, one thing that I love doing that already I'm looking forward to, and I hope other people are as well, is you finish along the mall and there's obviously Buckingham Palace behind you and there's loads of people. Do give, like, the people who have come out to support you, give them a bit of recognition. I think I'm going to try and do a Kipchoge style finish, regardless of the time. I'm looking forward to that. So start thinking of like a finish that you're going to do, because that's exciting and that can get you through the last bit as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that part.
And yourself, Natasha?
And just enjoy the process and expect that it is going to hurt at some point, and don't panic when it does start to hurt. Just trust the process, trust that you've done the training to get you through. Just believe in yourself.
No, brilliant. And Amrit, we'll finish with you, mate. You're just on mute, sorry.
That's a
There was going to be one of us that did it. I agree. I think this year for me is my 10th London Marathon, and every single one of them has been completely different. But the biggest thing you can do when you go there is just trust yourself, trust that you are lucky and privileged to be part of this epic event. I mean, it's epic. Anyone in their right mind would trade places with you on that very given Sunday that you're going to be lining up. And again, like, the marathon is meant to test you, it's meant to challenge you, and you're going to have dark moments in the race, but that is the beauty of the marathon. I think enjoy it, soak it in. Agree with Nick in terms of there's going to be people out there who are going to be cheering you and willing you on, people you don't know, people who just literally are just basically willing you to the finish line, and soak it in. And when it does come time to chase your goal, if it's still on, don't be afraid to go for it. Don't be afraid to trust that you can actually do it. And then, yeah, soak in the last few miles, because they're probably one of the best finish lines in the world. I mean, hopefully the Queen's watching us from the window, so give her a smile as you're going around the corner.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much. For those of you guys who have tuned in, thank you for taking the time from your evening as well to tune in. If you don't already follow these four legends, I highly recommend it. So Marcus is at the Marathon Marcus. Natasha is at Natasha.Cockram. Nick is at Just a Little Bester. His name is Nick, not Justin. And then Amritpal is at Amritpal Ghatora. And do follow them. And if you have any questions, you know, they're amazing people. Reach out, and they're always willing to answer. If there's anything injury related, you could reach out to me. My handle is at It's My Physio Adrian. But more importantly, we're doing this chat to also help Marcus with him raising money for Samaritans, which is a great initiative. They do a lot of great work with mental health to help people. It's £5 for every call that Samaritans takes, and in many cases, like Marcus was chatting with me, it can be life-changing. So the link to donate for Samaritans is in Marcus's bio, and we'll send you guys an email as well. This is being recorded, so give me a few days to try and just chop and edit a few things, and then I will send you a link to the recording. But to everyone and to you four, thank you. I really appreciate it, and have a great night.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Wait.
Cheers.